Previously on Transformers University, we've been scouring all of the media of the original Generation 1 Transformers boom, and we continue to do so with the centerpiece of the Transformers universe in 1985, the cartoon, as we cover episodes 16 through 20 of Season 2, which takes us to overall G1 episode, something like 36.
Wait, what is that anyway? Something like 36? Does that include me?
On Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode 27 of Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner and operator of TFU.INFO, and today we're continuing our dive into Season 2 of the original cartoon, Generation 1 as it's known, with episodes 16 through 20. Today we're going to talk about the Master Builders, Berserk, Microbots, and Megatron's Master Plan Parts 1 and 2. Now, before I get into our first episode, the Master Builders, I just want to thank everyone who's signed up over at patreon.com/TFU.INFO and become part of our Patreon. You got to hear this episode at least 24 hours ahead of everyone else. And don't forget, if you want to sign up, just swing on by patreon.com/TFU.INFO. And one more quick plug. We are still giving away a Studio Series Thundercracker. All you got to do, check out our video about the giveaway over at youtube.com/TFU.INFO, youtube.com/TFU.INFO. And be sure to subscribe. Help us get to 1,000 subscribers. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we will give away that Thundercracker, and all you have to do to enter is just comment on the video. All right, so we are deep in the heart of Season 2 of the original cartoon, and this is really where we start getting into a very interesting area of the show, because these episodes, for the most part, focus on spotlighting individual characters. It's kind of like a half-hour toy commercial for each individual toy, or one or two toys, depending, especially for the first 3 episodes that we are going to cover today. And Master Builders is definitely a spotlight episode for Grapple and, to a lesser extent, Hoist. The episode was written by David N. Gottlieb and Herb Engelhart. Mr. Gottlieb was a writer on cartoons such as Mask and the Jetsons movie. Herb Engelhart, also a writer on the Jetsons movie, and wrote some Thundercats as well. There's not a lot on these two guys. They didn't really have much outside of animation to fall back on as far as what I could tell you about them. What's a cartoon episode without some guests? And today, helping us go over why people love the Master Builders, from the Transmissions podcast, Daryl, a.k.a. the Cybertronian Beast.
Season 2's The Master Builders was by far my favorite episode as a kid. It didn't hurt the fact that it was one of the episodes that I had taped off the TV and could watch over and over again. I guess it stuck with me because of how well the episode built into its eventual conclusion. As the audience, we knew what was going to happen, but allow me to break it down for you. Grapple and Hoist invent a power tower. Really, it's Grapple. This power tower is a building that converts solar energy into energon cubes. When they present the idea to Optimus, he vetoes it on the basis that it may fall into Decepticon control. Oh well, guess that's the end of the episode. No. While on an outing to repair Powerglide, who had been recently shot down by Starscream, Grapple and Hoist are overheard discussing the power tower by the Constructicons, and in what should have been their first clue of what was to come, the Constructicons trap them so that they can convince Grapple and Hoist that they've left Megatron and want to build the power tower with them. Now cue a 1980s style montage of Grapple, Hoist, and the Constructicons working together to build the power tower. Now, as this montage ends, we hear Grapple in one of his more moronic lines of the show say,
My power tower will be powerless unless we can get the sun-focusing sphere up there. Oh, why didn't I see this predicament before?
Scrapper then arrives to save the day and merge with the other Constructicons to form Devastator. They pick up the sphere, and the power tower is now complete. Well, I guess that's the end of the episode. No. A large explosion then erupts behind Grapple, and Megatron's true plan is revealed. Off-screen, Grapple and Hoist are imprisoned within the tower. Next, Optimus Prime arrives on the scene with a large contingent of Autobots, and we get a really dumb line from Spike when he first sees the tower.
Man, look at that! That's so tall, the top is in a different time zone than the bottom.
Oh, Spike. Is this what happens when you don't finish school and instead go off to work on an oil platform? Anyway, the battle ensues, and the Autobots beat up on the Constructicons individually when Megatron orders them to fall back and regroup. Regroup, I say! The Constructicons run behind the tower in twos, and once the final pairing have arrived, Megatron says,
Constructicons, you know what to do!
As the Autobots race back behind the power tower, they find not 6 individual Constructicons, but one giant Devastator. And if you ask me, he's way bigger than when he was helping Grapple and Hoist. After some battling with Devastator and a quick dogfight between Powerglide and Ramjet, it's pretty cool, the Autobots figure out how to use Devastator's size to their advantage and get him to fall into the power tower, destroying it, as well as causing Devastator to decombine. It's at this point that Megatron and the Constructicons retreat, and the Autobots begin the task of looking for their friends Grapple and Hoist, whom they soon find. I guess, for me, my child brain wasn't interested in the power tower and the science of it, which, in fact, the power tower is now an accessory that comes with Masterpiece Grapple. How cool is that? But more so, I was interested in the combination sequences of Devastator and the great battle at the end. This really is a fun episode, and I highly recommend it.
And thanks, Daryl, for that awesome overview of the episode and why you love it so much. And if you're a longtime listener to this show, you know that the focus is always looking back through the lens of why we love this brand and these shows and these episodes and these comics and toys so much. And I think Daryl did a great job. So if you want to catch more of Daryl and the rest of the Transmissions team, search out Transmissions Podcast. It's just about everywhere you can find this podcast, and they are also now on Spotify. Now, one of the things Daryl failed to mention in his review of the Master Builders, and it's one of the more goofier things in this episode, so I understand why he skipped over it. There is a handful of times in this episode where Optimus Prime is learning about playing basketball, and instead of me just telling you about it, just take a listen to some of these clips.
Try to keep me from taking the ball.
All right, Spike. Am I drooling correctly?
The word is dribbling, Optimus.
Here, Spike, compute quickly.
Oh, but it didn't stop there.
Watch out, Spike. I'm driving for a layoff.
And from there, we will rebound into Auto Berserk Season 2, Episode 17. Overall, it's Episode 33 of the original series, written by Anthony Zalewski. He was a writer, also in animation, wrote on both the original Masters of the Universe as well as the New Adventures of He-Man, and also wrote for the incarnation of G.I. Joe produced by Deke, which is not the one that looks a lot like the Transformers. And if Master Builders was a spotlight for Grapple and Hoist, this episode was certainly a spotlight for Inferno and Red Alert. Now, this plot is fairly standard off the top. It's about the Autobots testing a new weapon called the Negavator, and they're doing it with the U.S. military. And for more on this episode, we're going to toss it to the gamer going gray, David Schulz.
Auto Berserk is by far my favorite of the original Transformers episodes. It starts with the Autobots helping the humans with some new super weapon that Wheeljack created, of course. And once again, of course, Soundwave is hiding as a tape recorder. There's a fight, as per usual, and one of the new characters, Red Alert, is damaged. And then he becomes paranoid, and that kind of is his thing, and this episode is a showcase of his thing. It's a very Red Alert-centric episode. Then that leads into another fight where a canyon's blocked and Red Alert is overheating. He eventually teams up with Starscream and goes into the bunker the Autobots have created, sneaks him in, thinking that Starscream's on his team, that everybody else is out to get him because he's paranoid. When the Autobots arrive, Red Alert takes out a bridge to stop the Autobots from helping. The Decepticons come back again. It's a pretty basic plot. There's nothing that special about the plot. The Decepticons retreat in the end, of course. The main thing about this episode, what is great, is the character moments in it. I'll get back to Red Alert, who leads it, and it's great with him, but all the other characters just have great things to do. Smokescreen gets to show off his smokescreen skills itself, blocking the Negavator at one point. Then the Decepticons try to get to it. They get all covered in smoke, and then Starscream yells, "Use your radar!" And then Smokescreen once again zaps them all, so they can't even talk straight.
Hey, my circuit's electric flew just out to mine. I'm blind flying. Away, move before collide we.
And then they all collide into a canyon wall. It's a funny moment. Then right after that, Ramjet gets a moment, and he's all covered with smoke and wants to take out the Autobots and slams right into Megatron, who replies with the best line of the episode.
I've got morons on my team.
Hoist is a bunch in this episode. He's also one of the newer characters. And just little moments. He always seems to be very helpful. And at one point, Optimus Prime almost crushes him with a cage protecting the Negavator, not waiting for Hoist to actually get to a safe distance, which is kind of unlike Optimus, but it's a funny moment. Inferno is a hot-headed character who's friends with Red Alert. Red Alert gets kind of pissed at him because Inferno went to go fight with the Autobots, and that's how Red Alert got hurt in the first place. But then at the very end, Red Alert is saved by Inferno, and then there's this touching line at the very end.
With friends like these, real friends, it's easy to be brave.
As Red Alert is being carried like a bride across the threshold by Inferno. It's touching, and I know that there are people who ship them. Okay, that's fine with me. I can see it. Starscream is great in this episode. He's full scheming. He does his thing. Soundwave even gets some funny lines, which at one point him and Rumble are fighting, and he yells to Rumble, "Rumble, eliminate resistance," and Rumble just responds,
I'm trying, Soundwave!
Grapple gets moments in talking about his buildings, and at one point he gets to totally be a robot in disguise. When the Decepticons at the end are going after the Autobots, he's just sitting there in vehicle mode, and they're ignoring him until he dumps a bunch of rocks on him. So it's just filled with these little character moments that makes it such a great episode. And this is not nostalgia talking. This is not an episode I had from my childhood. I didn't have that many. Mostly just season 1 episodes that I had the VHS tapes of and the movie. So season 2, I didn't get to view until I was in high school when Kid Rhino started putting out the VHS tapes, the later ones. And this was one of the early ones I saw it, and just like, this is a good episode. And the more I watched it, the more I realized this is a terrific Transformers episode. If you're trying to get someone into Transformers, I mean, sure, start with them with More Than Meets the Eye, but Autobot Berserk is a great episode to show them. Even if they're like, well, who are all these new characters? It's not like you actually have an answer to give them anyway. Great episode, highly recommended. I'd say the highlight of season 2.
And of course, you can catch David on his YouTube channel, Gamer Going Gray. And of course, he's a regular contributor to this podcast. Now, a couple of things I think are neat about this episode that I do want to kind of just note in here. First off, from an art standpoint, Grapple's head, because Grapple does appear in this episode, is now painted black like the toy, whereas the previous episode it was yellow. We have a rare appearance in this episode by Frenzy, the red one. I also find it neat during this episode that Starscream and Red Alert at one point are just hanging out in a garage talking as Starscream tries to unhatch his plan on Red Alert to convince them to work together. You don't see that much in G1 or even in Transformers cartoons in general at all, and it's just kind of a neat touch. And finally, speaking of Starscream and Red Alert, eventually when they fight each other at the end, it's Starscream's Null Ray that stabilizes Red Alert. And so another neat twist in that they call back the Null Ray as one of Starscream's weapons, but that it's also used in a capacity where the power of the beam, whatever the Null Ray does, because it's never actually explained, does nullify the effects of Red Alert's short-circuited functions. And from spotlighting Autobot cars in the last 2 episodes, we're going to actually spotlight the Autobot scientist Perceptor in the next episode, Microbots. And Microbots is Season 2, Episode 18, overall Episode 34, written by David Wise. And if you remember how we talked about David Wise in a previous episode, David Wise was a writer on Masters of the Universe prior to Transformers and was the story editor, which is basically the head writer on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon afterwards. And David Wise is certainly known for recycling plots and ideas and possibly even bits of script. So we're going to introduce a new segment. It's a segment I like to call Wise to the Game. So when you hear that sound clip, just know we're going to do a little bit of comparison to another piece of David Wise's career. Now, the episode begins with a Decepticon ship found in Mayan ruins. So here's this ancient human ruins being dug up by archaeologists, and they find a spaceship inside. The news actually reports that it crashed 4 million years ago, which would be at the same time the Decepticons and Autobots crashed the Ark on Earth. Megatron knows what's inside of this ship, and then we cut back to the Autobots at base. Brawn and Perceptor are arguing while Perceptor is trying to fix a microchip in Ironhide. The argument is basically Brains versus Brawn. Brawn feels that Perceptor, because he hangs back at the base and does mechanical work, and that he is not a fighter, that he is not a true Autobot. The Autobots get word of the ship that is found in South America, and Optimus Prime, of course, says, let's drive there. So they drive from the Pacific Northwest to somewhere in South America. Now, at least this time they are not driving over water. How they get around things like the national borders and just where in South America this is left open to interpretation, to say the least. The Decepticons, they're hanging out in basically a rainforest in South America, and Starscream is attacked by a snake. Ravage fights it out with a cheetah, and then the Decepticons eventually make their way through and find the ship. Megatron removes what was called an energy maximizer with the name of the Heart of Cybertron. Says it powered the Decepticon ship through space before they crashed on Earth. So this is actually a really neat point in the continuity, and actually a very important one later on when we get to Beast Wars. And this ship here is what will later be known as the Nemesis. Now, many are wondering if you are familiar with what the Nemesis is, or if you're just saying, hey, isn't the Decepticon ship underwater? Well, that's a different ship. They built that ship over the course of the first 3 episodes of the series. That ship would later get a name. It would be called the Victory. Now, the Victory is the ship that is underneath the water and acts as the Decepticon base most of the time. This ship, which would eventually be called the Nemesis, is the one the Decepticons were flying in the original episode before they crashed to Earth. So, Megatron takes the heart of Cybertron and has Hook implanted in his body. This thing powers him up incredibly. The Autobots attack Megatron, Optimus, Brawn, Ironhide, Ratchet, Huffer, Bluestreak, Windcharger, Smokescreen, all defeated by Megatron simply firing lasers out of his hands. In order to win, the Autobots need to drop an entire hill on the Decepticons, and then they head back to base. Back at base, there's another weird little animation thing. There's a whole bunch of damaged computer screens at the base, even though it's the Autobots that are damaged and not the base. The Autobots begin repairs, and we find out back at the now fallen hill, the Decepticons dig out. Cut back to the arc where Prime diverts all power to the force fields. And we find out that Perceptor has an idea. It's called Honey, I Shrunk the Autobots. Okay, that movie came out after this episode, so we can't really use that as a reference. But, like I said, we're wise to the game. Now, David Wise must have a thing for Isaac Asimov's Fantastic Voyage. It's a plot device that's been used in television and movies way many times. It's basically where a character gets shrunken down to microscopic size to usually enter another person, another living thing, and cure them of something like an inner space or remove something, steal something. And in this episode, Bumblebee, Brawn, and Perceptor are going to be shrunk down because early in the episode, when Perceptor was repairing Ironhide, he has this ray that enlarges microchips, and so he can see them better. And then he repairs them and shrinks them back down and puts them back in. And so we're using this same technology to shrink Bumblebee, Brawn, and Perceptor. They're going to go inside of Megatron and disconnect the heart of Cybertron from his body because they know they can't defeat him when he's that powered up, and remove it from him. So Powerglide is enlisted to fly the new Microbots out to the Decepticons. Cut away. The Decepticons, victorious, are hanging out, and they're getting drunk.
This stuff's the greatest. Those were the good old days back on Cybertron. Didn't have to sneak around in these ugly ass disguises.
Now, in what I can only refer to as visual comedy, Powerglide drops the package of mini Microbots onto Megatron before getting discovered. But the Decepticons are too drunk to fight him, and this includes Laserbeak trying to fly, spinning around, and crashing. And of course, being, quote, over-energized, Megatron feels he can fight the world. So Megatron is going to go take the fight by himself to the Autobots as Bumblebee, Brawn, and Perceptor sneak inside of Megatron's body to find the heart of Cybertron. Now, while they're inside the body, and where do they end up?
Where are we? Megatron's shoulder joint. His chest must be around here somewhere.
I'm glad you told us. I never could have figured that out myself.
Just hope he doesn't make any sudden moves.
Oh, there's that sound. We are wise to the game. I said David Wise was the story editor on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in a particular episode called Shredder and Splintered. Krang, the brain monster that sits in the robot costume or robot transport, whatever you want to call it, gets enlarged to a huge size, and a couple of the turtles have to sneak into his body to find a way to shrink him back down. And where do they end up?
Oops, we must be in the shoulder joint. Let's just hope Krang doesn't make any sudden moves.
Alright, so back to the Transformers. The Autobots inside of Megatron start being attacked by essentially his immune system. They flee, and they end up in Megatron's brain. Brawn wants to punch Megatron in the brain. But before he can, he's attacked by Megatron's, quote, evil brain impulses. These are little snake-shaped things, and they attack the Autobots. Outside, Megatron has landed at the Ark and is firing on the base, on all of the Autobots at the Ark. Perceptor, Brawn, and Bumblebee, they're looking for the heart of Cybertron, and they figure out a way to get there by letting the evil brain impulses do the work.
That's Megatron's database conveying orders to the heart of Cybertron. If we can hitch a ride, it'll lead us straight to it.
Here comes one.
Grab it! There it is!
Oh, there's that sound again. Back when he was working on Masters of the Universe, David Wise wrote an episode called Day of the Machines. In fact, the last time we talked about David Wise, we played a clip from Day of the Machines where he did cannibalize part of that script for a previous Transformers episode. So, I believe that... Oh, that was the Transformers episode called Day of the Machines. And here, not only did he cannibalize one thing from previous Masters of the Universe episode, he used it twice in that episode.
This spy beam permanently aimed at Man-at-Arms' lab. Since Bite is made of energy, he can ride the beam straight into the lab.
So the Microbots find the heart of Cybertron. They fight their way through. Perceptor disconnects it. And now they have to flee their way out of Megatron because they are growing. Oh, and there is that sound one more time. So, on their way out, they're growing, trying to get out of Megatron. And they do. They get out before they get too big and before the heart of Cybertron becomes too unstable. And Bumblebee, on his way out of the evil Decepticon leader, says this.
Is it my imagination, or is this tunnel getting tighter?
It's us. We're returning to our normal size. We've got to get out of here.
Whoa! Excuse us.
And just a few years later, in that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode, here's Donatello making his way out of Krang.
We gotta get out of here. We'll be crushed. Excuse us.
And once out of Megatron, Brawn hurls the heart of Cybertron into the sky as it grows increasingly unstable. Perceptor transforms into his microscope mode, tracks it, and then blows it up using his microscope cannon. And that resolves the episode, but not before Brawn takes a liking to his new pal.
Anyone who doesn't think he's a hero is gonna have to answer to me.
And from Spotlight episodes, we end up on the first part of another two-parter as we go to Season 2, Episode 19. Episode 35 overall, Megatron's Master Plan, Part 1, by Donald F. Glute. This one starts out with the Coneheads and Starscream attacking the solar energy facility built by a businessman by the name of Sean Berger in a city called Central City. We know this because the plant is being opened by the mayor. Now, the mayor of Central City apparently defeated Berger in the election for mayor. Inside the solar plant, Berger has tanks ready to fight the Decepticons. In the midst of this fight, the Autobots arrive, which makes Berger not happy. During this fight, we have some cool things like Trax uses his black beam gun on the Decepticon jets and helps win the day for the Autobots. Again, much to the chagrin of Sean Berger, who wanted to be the hero of that day. Out of that, the humans love the Autobots, and the mayor of Central City wants to honor them. In the meantime, in Berger's office, Laserbeak was spying, playing that old gag of sitting on his desk as a cassette, and kidnaps Berger. He takes Berger to Megatron, where Megatron tells Sean Berger this.
It pains me to see a man of your obvious brilliance deceived by Autobot propaganda. Autobot propaganda? You see, you are so brainwashed by it that you don't even suspect that they are evil and we are good. Oh, the power of public relations.
So this is a really interesting thing in this day and age from almost 35 years ago, right? So we have a powerful person in Megatron claiming that the media has misportrayed him and his people. It's certainly a parallel to some of the things we see in 2018. To quote Confucius, there is nothing new under the sun. That said, Berger wants proof that the Autobots are evil, and Megatron says he will give it to him. And then we go to an oil field where the Autobots are stealing oil. Berger, watching above from a helicopter, records video of the Autobots being evil and stealing oil. Back at Central City, they are really good at putting together a quick parade. And this is the Autobot Day Parade, and it's over at City Hall. Berger shows up to this parade, to the television coverage of the parade, and hands the tape operator a tape demanding he interrupt the mayor. He also reminds the tape operator that he owns the TV network. The tape shows the Autobots stealing energy from the oil field. There's a second tape that shows the bots using an evil-making ray to turn the Decepticons evil, and a third tape from inside the Autobot base where the Autobots hatch their evil schemes. Amidst this confusion, the Autobots return to base, and as they leave, the crowd turns on them. Berger sends his tank to the Ark, demanding surrender. Turns out the mayor is also with him, and places the Autobots under arrest. Optimus surrenders the Autobots to law enforcement, and they drive off. There is a trial at a football stadium for the Autobots. The Decepticons decide to show up just to watch. And at that point, Spike runs onto the field to get behind the scenes. Soundwave dispatches Ravage to stop him, and in their chase, Ravage is foiled by a revolving door. And I haven't seen anyone defeated by a revolving door like that since Officer Sweetchuck in Police Academy 3.
Sweetchuck! What a lobby!
And having escaped Ravage, Spike has a chance to go over the tape, and he finds out, yes, that the Decepticons were faking the Autobots stealing oil, that it was in fact Starscream dressed up as Optimus Prime and a number of the other Seekers dressed up as other Autobots, which is weird because in the attack scene between the Autobots and Decepticons, or the fake Autobots and the real Decepticons, Starscream was one of the ones flying and attacking the Autobots. So how he was in two places at once is not really explained. Just then, Ravage catches Spike, and we cut back to the Autobots, who are now found guilty by the court on Earth. They are sentenced to be banished from Earth, and Berger provides them a spacecraft to leave. Now, I understand Berger's a rich dude, but he just had a spacecraft sitting around, and he's worried about running for mayor? You think this guy has some, I don't know, either A, would have some bigger vision, or B, why does he have a spaceship sitting around? The Autobots board the spaceship, they launch, and Megatron heads over to the Ark, where on Teletran 1, he shoots the screen, but like I guess with like a mild beam or some way of hacking it, because he changes the flight plan. Well, he disconnects communication between the ship and Teletran 1, but he also changes the flight plan from Cybertron to the Sun. And I will pause here to say, why is the Sun a menu option here? Like, it's not like Megatron wrote Sun. He just scanned it and then changed it to Sun. So clearly there was a menu option here with like Cybertron, the Moon, the Sun. The Sun should never be a destination. But that is where our cliffhanger ends. So with the Autobots on a collision course to the Sun and about to die, we turn to part 2 of Megatron's Master Plan, Season 2, Episode 20, overall Episode 36.
What? Something like 36?
And for more on that, I give you Gabriel Owens, the Salty Seaman.
Hey folks, Salty Seaman here. Going to review Megatron's Master Plan Part 2. I had called to do one part of this episode at least well ahead of time. This is one I did want to comment on personally because it's one of the ones I've had the biggest change of hearts on, and just in the last 2 years. There was at one point I would have, I definitely called this the stupidest episode of the entire run. Maybe, even dumber than Prime Problem by a bit. Those are two kind of, for me, fight, in terms of logic and pure storytelling, always, stuck out to me as just really, really bad and lazy writing. Prime Problem is still really, really stupid. And I know other people say, like, the worst episodes, Carnage in C Minor, City of Steel. Plot-wise, those weren't really bad. They just had really bad execution. This is a case. These two episodes, I think, is a case of just really, really bad and lazy writing. Up until, I said just recently, but we'll talk about that as I go on reviewing Megatron's Master Plan Part 2. Basically, the Decepticons team up with a Hollywood television guy. They create a bunch of fake news and submit it to the media around the world. And despite everything everyone's seen for probably about a year, going on a year at this point in the world, everyone immediately turns on the Autobots, saying, you guys are, it's obvious, we've been fooled. And the world just immediately believes this fake news. And they're just, it's, not to the point the Autobots completely acquiesce, even though they know it's a mistake, but they're being so weirdly goody-goody to the point of, endangering lives. They accept the banishment. Megatron is reprograms Teletran 1 to send them into the Sun. And that's where we pick up with a parade for the Decepticons. Yeah, from a military standpoint, it's very interesting to see the Decepticons know how to march in time. If you ever wondered, do Transformer military people know marching movements? This episode answers that yes. We also have a cut to a fairly famous cut to a kid in it's like a Megatron-ish outfit, but he strongly resembles Daniel. Of course, he wouldn't be born for another, 15 years, I think, at this point. Gabe math there. But, and plus the Megatron suit kind of looks like an exosuit. It's just kind of creepy. And there's another little bit of famous bit here where Rumble, the blue one, tells Soundwave to get down in a dance club, and Soundwave is down on one knee, I think, because he can't stand in it, basically. But it's supposed to be comical, but it's fandom interpretation have made it more comical that he took Rumble's suggestion literally and just got down on one knee. So take it however you will. It's still one of the funnier and goofier bits of season 2. Of course, we cannot forget the guy offering Laserbeak a cracker and Laserbeak looking like he's about ready to just eye blast that dude to death. But unfortunately knows he has to keep up the charade for just a little bit longer. But also, the whole scene's just goofy. And definitely for those you in the camp of great as Optimus Prime is, he's our hero, wise and compassionate. He makes some really, really dumb decisions in life. And here we see he had this resolve to follow the Earth's wishes and exile himself and his troops from their planet. And then halfway through, he's like, yeah, you know what? I was wrong. So I'm just going to turn around and go back, which, would make him, even worse in their eyes. Is like, not only is he, this evil guy who's been fooling them all the time, but then, of course, he turned around and broke his promise and came back. So, all around just poor leadership skills on Optimus Prime's part here. Of course, we have an interesting point also is basically how did Chip and the Witwickies not get arrested for treason? They're basically, known sympathizers and people who work closely with the Autobots. So they would have known by the logic of the storyline, and yet they're allowed to roam unfettered. They don't seem to, I think Megatron would have, just out of, covering his bases, hey, these guys are troublemakers. Let's get the humans to lock up them as traitors, plan complete. And it kind of a large oversight on both the Earth's, on I guess it'd be the U.S. jurisdiction on the Witwickies and Chip Chase, and Megatron at least not suggesting it. So a bit odd. We get to a press conference with Burger and the Decepticons. Right after seemingly the Autobots have exploded into the sun, been evaporated, and Megatron reveals it was a ruse all along. He's planning on taking over the planet. Somewhere you can hear about 20% of the country going, I'd still vote for him again. So one of the security guard, he turns on Burger here. Ant, help me out here. The voice is he's one of the main voice actors on the show, but I'm not placing him right now. But it took me right out because it was like one of the Autobots' voices coming from the security guy.
That would be Dan Gilvezan, the voice of Bumblebee.
We've been working for a traitor.
We get a little bit of Dirge's tech spec here as he goes to attack, as the Seekers go to attack some unnamed city.
Let us teach them a lesson in sorrow.
So that's a nice little touch and kind of reminds us to a little bit of why he's his own character, even though we don't see it a whole lot in the cartoon. And as Megatron takes over the city, and then promises to take over many more, he also names it Megatronia 1, which I believe we see get reused in fiction beyond this. And Burger's kind of abrupt running away. This is the end. This is the apocalypse. Kind of like almost a retroactive Alex Jones type here, which I think kind of fits the whole retroactive motif this episode has. We get while the Decepticons are turning the humans into slaves, we get a brief shot of the Triple Changer standing guard, and a pretty funny scene of Blitzwing holding both his weapons, his energy sword, I believe, and his rifle, and the sword is like comically small. That they're scaling whoever drew that scene just was a bit off, and it's just, I mean, obviously there's always animation errors in these episodes, but that one just always makes me giggle. And of course, as the Earthlings are being enslaved, Burger's getting what's coming to him. We see a little moment where Burger's not a complete monster. He does he feels bad for Spike and tries to help him out at one point. I guess trying to make he actually gets to be a fairly in-depth character here. Given the where it comes from. An '80s toy show. But the next part is a little more egregious. It's very hard to say anything other than cartoon logic. I mean, Trailbreaker's force fields are apparently now magic. His ability for the force field to somehow withstand the heat and generate enough coolant to keep everyone alive within the force field is some ungodly power. Really, they should just use Trailbreaker's powers to greater advantage, apparently. But I digress. Again, it's sometimes this is cartoon logic, and you just got to go with it. As Spike is trying to create some cover so Chip can escape and get back to Autobot headquarters, we see another example of Spike being absurdly strong. Now, the kid grew up on oil fields and construction sites, apparently. So I grant you he's probably stronger than your average 15-year-old. But yeah, here we see him just kind of shoulder block this giant wagon of Energon cubes, which probably weighed a good bit, but he manages to just make it fly. And just one of many examples of him. Seemingly, maybe he's got some cybernetic implants we're not aware of. Maybe from Autobot Spike. Who knows? I'll get an interesting scene here. I think maybe one of the few in the show where we get to see all the fighter jets up to this point from the Decepticons in one flight here. You have both the Season 1 and Season 2 Seekers and Blitzwing. Just really cool. Not all the flyers, of course, but all the specific the jet fighters. I really like that. Also, Optimus Prime completely lies to make himself look better here.
Impossible! I saw you disintegrated!
Illusion, Megatron. Just as you made the people of Earth see us Autobots as villains, so we too staged an illusion.
We created an illusion, just like you did. No, you didn't. Trailbreaker pulled out his magic force field out of his ass, and Chip Chase basically, are actually thrust through pure, happenstance. Didn't know destroying Teletransport 1 would break the override. I mean, you did nothing. You got completely lucky here, but boy, he sure talked it up like he did some great leadership. I say overall, Optimus comes out the worst of any one of these episodes. Recent years, I'll take back my opinion that the world would not be as gullible as to fall for Megatron's little trap here, but or plan, his master plan. But you know what? Yeah, I think his episode's a lot more plausible now than I did in the past. The final battle is, I think, one of the bigger set pieces we get in the show. Like, this is really where I can remember, like, we really see, like, everyone who is basically out at this time. Definitely the full Decepticon cast minus the Insecticons, I guess. But I think they're considered not really Decepticons in they're kind of quasi, however it works. So they're pretty much the only ones missing, and I think a handful of Autobots, skids as always. But overall, this is one of the larger set-piece battles in terms of characters that we see through the show. Though I would be remiss if I don't bring up the absence of the Dinobots here. Speaking of missing Autobots, who not only just missing from the battle scene, but missing from the whole episode, which is kind of a plot hole in itself. And with Sparkplug calling Burger a piece of dog lunch, I wonder what that means. The episode wraps up. The Autobots forgive Earth, like, we forgive you for trying to shoot us in the sun and not believing us after over a year of saving your asses from the Decepticons. It's cool. We cooled, homie. That's kind of it. Again, just kind of going over what how this episode has kind of changed my mind, and really, really interesting one to watch in retrospect. Back over to you, Ant.
And for more from Gabe, you can check out his YouTube channel, The Salty Seaman. You can find that at youtube.com/recharge138. A couple things, there are a couple things I thought were kind of cool in this episode that I'd also like to mention. And Gabe really did a good job of covering just about everything. starting from the beginning of the episode, when Spike is out looking for evidence, he's gone a while. Like, this either all happens really quickly. As I mentioned earlier, the people of Central City are really good at putting on a parade really quickly. Because the Autobots just left. Spike was already gone looking for evidence, and he's still looking at evidence when we get back to him. And no one is really wondering why he's gone so long. So it must be the same day. He also drops a bookshelf full of tapes on Ravage, who then shows up at the dance club later on, completely not damaged. Also worth noting, while the Autobots are about to fly into the sun, Cosmos is flying in front of the ship. And if he's just outside of the ship, shouldn't he be able to just physically redirect the ship by transforming and trying to push it, since we are in a zero gravity environment? Another interesting note is during the conversation leading up to that, Ironhide is really not happy with Optimus. So much so that he makes Optimus doubt himself, which is why he decides to turn back. Later on in the episode, when Spike tries to flee Megatron's enslavement, he trips over a light as Laserbeak does shoot the tape with the evidence on it. Sean Berger steps up here and he takes out Laserbeak with a boom mic by hitting him with a boom mic. And then Spike actually stops Ravage by shining a floodlight in his face, which is a partial callback to the original 3-part miniseries where Ravage being exposed to light distracts him. We also get our first glimpse at Astro Train in this episode. And we have this weird escape sequence. Now, when Spike tries to create a distraction for Chip Chase to escape, Chip wheels himself out of the solar complex where he is being enslaved. Now, remember, Chip is in a wheelchair. So Chip escapes by loading himself into the back of a cargo truck that is shipping off Energon cubes, and he wheels himself up a ramp to get into the back of basically what Optimus Prime will look like in vehicle mode. Now, the truck drives away and Chip escapes, but then the truck driver, who isn't enslaved, stops at a diner. So it leaves a lot of questions, like if the whole city is enslaved by the Decepticons, who's running the diner? Why is the driver not somehow enslaved by the Decepticons, since he is hauling their precious Energon cubes? And when he stops at the truck stop, he looks in his side mirror and sees Chip rolling off, saying this is his stop. Now, Chip's already on the ground and he's rolling. How did he get the trailer, 1, open from the inside, and then 2, down from the back of the truck that quickly? So it couldn't have been like an elevator or a little elevator, a mechanical platform. He had to have jumped his wheelchair off the back of that truck. And from there, that's how Chip ends up at the Ark, which allows Thrust to destroy Teletran 1, which allows the Autobots into getting that lucky break and becoming free, as Gabe mentioned. And finally, in the final battle, there's a lot shown there, as Gabe mentioned. There's a lot of characters, and it's actually pretty well animated. But some of the more interesting things is we see Starscream get shot twice in 2 different clips, and we also see the Constructicons all wounded and on the ground. So it's not even like Megatron can call for them to form Devastator. And the episode ends with Berger having to face justice, and this from Optimus Prime.
You are going to face justice, and may it be kinder to you than it was to us.
And that will wrap things up for another edition of Transformers University. If you like the show, please swing on by our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, and subscribe to the channel. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and once we do, we will be giving away that studio series, Thundercracker. Of course, if you'd like to support the show directly, swing on by to our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO, where there are a number of options, starting at just $1 for you to help the show every month. Lastly, if you want to keep up with the show on social media, here's how you get in touch. Twitter at TFU_info. Facebook.com/TFU.info. Instagram.com/TFU.info. Of course, on the web, www.tfu.info. And if you want to go old school and email me, email address is info@tfu.info. Next time on the show, we are going back to Japan to talk a little bit about some of the original media that was created in 1985 in Japan. And if you like music as much as I do, you're going to want to catch this next episode because we're going to talk a little bit about the soundtrack to Generation 1. All that next time on Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali. Until then, see you.